I'd like to welcome you to this final lecture, as they were formerly called. I prefer to think of it as a talk in this first series, which we hope will only be the first in a series from now on. I'm extraordinarily fortunate, I think, particularly compared with the previous speakers, in that the information about Chartwell that is available about the Churchills, their family, society and world, not to mention the garden, is voluminous. The book, Stefan Buznaki's Churchill and Chartwell, The Untold Story of Churchill's Houses and Gardens, as the title makes clear, is about a lot more than just Chartwell. The biography page is just one of many such, to be found in reference works from the Encyclopedia Britannica to Wikipedia. I should also like to acknowledge the assistance in this undertaking I have received from the website Flickr. I particularly draw your attention to Flickr because it contains literally millions of photographs of just about everywhere on Earth, more than 6,000 of Chartwell alone. Most of them available for download and legally usable for such not-for-profit occasions as this today. The British Dictionary of National Biography contains entries under the names of not only Winston, but also his mother, Jenny Jerome, his father, Lord Randolph, his wife, Clementine, who you already saw under the umbrella in that opening slide, and his only son, Randolph. My problem has been to compress and organize such a massive information, which includes many biographies, not to mention Winston Churchill's own writings, in the hope, above all, of stimulating your curiosity with regard to these extraordinary people and their environment, to the extent that you rush out and pursue further reading and looking for yourselves. To understand what you see when you view these pictures, and if you visit Chartwell, this is the entrance facade today, and I will be referring back to this a little later on. You first need to know something about its historical and topographical setting, and about the social stratum into which Winston was born in 1874. Chartwell, this is a view from the terrace lawn, is at Westerham, which is in Kent. And Kent is distinctive in the UK in much the same way Santa Fe is in the US, in both cases because of their history. The continuous historic period in the history of Kent begins at Richborough, where the Romans landed in AD 43, bypassing the ramparts of the White Cliff of Dover in the reign of the Emperor Claudius, whom I'm sure at least some of you will recognize. Thus began the process of incorporating most of the island of Britain into the Roman Empire, of which it remained a part for nearly 400 years. There are in fact two sets of ruins here, Roman and those of the nearby, now closed power plant dating from the 1960s. Look west and you see a landscape not too different from what it must have been like when Rome was at its height. Turn your gaze to the east, and you are confronted with the 20th century. These, incidentally, are the White Cliffs as they must have appeared to Julius Caesar himself in 55 BC, and his Roman successors in 43 AD. Since, through the miracle of Photoshop, I have been able to remove the few signs of modern development that appear on the cliff's tops in the original photograph. I should add here that very few of the other pictures I will be showing you are doctored in this way, and I will indicate where any has been so interfered with. The Romans built that arch at Richborough, now long since gone, that archaeology has revealed must have created much the same impression of gleaming white imperial grandeur that the Arc de Triomphe does in Paris, with the sun out and in the right place today. The picture on the right is in fact a doctored version No, the picture on the right is of a reconstruction which appeared in one of the most recent numbers of the magazine Country Life, after I had prayed around with the Arc de Triomphe, which obviously I did because I removed all of the carvings and the decoration from most of it. Kent, also in Roman times, was the site of Britain's first palace, the enormous villa at Fishbourne, not the home of a Roman, but of a native client king, described in one Fishbourne publicity blurb as, quote, one of the greatest buildings in the empire, unquote. Kent's secular primacy in the Roman province, which this structure so aptly symbolizes, was later eclipsed only by the rise of Londinium, the modern London. Kent's primacy in matters of religion came rather later. In 597 AD, Pope Gregory the Great sent the man who became known as Saint Augustine, as distinguished from Saint Augustine, who is more famous in the United States, who founded the see which became the seat of the first Archbishop of Canterbury. This, of course, is Canterbury Cathedral today. That first Archbishop's 21st century successor is about to marry the future king of the modern country which eventually came to dominate the British Isles. Kent was the first of the 7 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms known as the Heptarchy. Kent is at the bottom right in bright green, with the much larger Wessex immediately to the left or the west of Kent in bright red. The 7 kingdoms were eventually forged by King Alfred and his successors, culminating in King Harold, into the country we know today as England. The Battle of that's Hastings being shot, Harold being shot in the eye at the Battle of Hastings. The Norman William conquerors at Hastings brought the current continuous line of monarchs to the English throne. The numbering of England's monarchs dates only from the conquest, or there would be many more Edwards in the royal chronology. These would range from Saint Edward, king and martyr, after whom, incidentally, the boarding school in England I attended is named, to Saint Edward the Confessor, in whose chair some future Archbishop of Canterbury, presumably, will crown Kings Charles III and King William V. The Archbishop who crowned Queen Elizabeth II occasionally conducted the communion service at St. Edward's School. When he was officiating, there would be a great shift in the congregation, with everyone trying to elbow their way to the side of the communion rail on which he was officiating. Schoolboy snobbery, yes, but also unconscious genuflection to the importance of Canterbury and Kent in English history. Battle Abbey was built on the site of William the Conqueror's fortuitous victory in commemoration of what happened in probably the most famous year in English history, 1066. Kent, in other words, occupies a very special place in the English imagination, and it is not by any means insignificant that as New Mexico is known in these United States as the land of enchantment, Kent is thought of throughout the United Kingdom as the Garden of England, where, not incidentally, a lot of history has happened. By the 16th century, Kent, as an English county, had become, in consequence of its history and location, the closest part of England to the continent, the county perhaps more associated than any other with the monarchy. That is, with central government and national power. Long before Winston Churchill became the head of that government and the very personification of political power. For all intents and purposes, it had by then another post-Roman palace, the stately home that is known simply today as Knowle. Knowle, originally built by a latter-day Archbishop of Canterbury, reputedly has 35 rooms, 12 courtyards, 4 staircases, and 7 turrets. It was soon forcibly acquired by the Crown in the person of Henry VIII, always jealous of overmighty subjects, and inherited by Queen Elizabeth. This is by far the best of the many portraits of good Queen Bess, and almost certainly the best likeness. No one knows why it is not in England, but in Italy, in Siena to be precise, which probably accounts for the fact that it is very little known outside scholarly circles. Elizabeth eventually gave Knowle to a certain cousin, Thomas Sackville, Baron Buckhurst and later Earl of Dorset. From him, it eventually, and notoriously, did not descend to Vita Sackville West, author of several well-regarded novels, the best of which is All Passion Spent, and the object of Virginia Woolf's literary love letter to Vita, the novel Orlando. Vita reacted to her exclusion from the inheritance of Knowle on account of her gender by buying a 16th century ruin once belonging to a non-Sackville ancestor of hers called Sissinghurst, and creating there probably the most famous garden in England today. The rose growing over the central pergola in the famous White Garden is Rosa Mulligani. The one growing to the roof of the entrance wing on both sides of the archway is the climbing cultivar Alan Chandler, whose brilliant scarlet blooms are followed by spectacular fig-shaped hips in the fall. The view at the top right is of the Lime Walk, in which branches of the lindens are woven together in a fashion known as pleaching, then clipped back every year to form a sort of hedge on stilts. The Sackville's Knowle is far from being the only historical or financial powerhouse location in Kent. Hever Castle is not only famous for being the childhood home of Anne Boleyn, but for being later being given over by Henry the Charitable to his discarded fourth wife, Anne of Cleves. It was in a ruinous condition when it was bought by William Waldorf Astor in 1603. He and his heirs restored the original building, added a huge residence and a series of guest quarters, all in Tudor style, and created a group of gardens in this picture seemingly topped off by a truly enormous man-made lake. And I nearly said man-dug, but that's almost literally what it was. It was dug by hand. Kent, in other words, has a social status in England nowhere else quite equals. Vita Sackville West, by her creation of the garden at Sissinghurst, this is another view from the tower, with the Weald beyond the walls, plus her reputation as a fine novelist, although in my opinion a lesser poet, brought to Kent horticultural and literary distinction at much the same time as Winston was bestowing his latter-day political fame on it. Both Churchill and Vita Sackville West regarded the Weald was a mixture of awe, respect, and love that had something of the mystical about it. It was the world Vita was writing about in her long poem, The Land. So Kent had long, by the early 20th century, been a place to be for both the upper classes, always, and latterly, the aspirant British middle classes.